People, I am so excited and delighted to welcome Suzy Miller from Best Way to Divorce. Now, you may feel this is a strange topic for mindset alchemy. Let's put it in perspective. When we work with energy, separation is part of it. Understanding who we are is part of it. And you know what? We're all human anyway. And Suzy is here to show us. Sorry, I was thinking about a Penny and I said her name. Suzy is here to introduce herself and tell you the reason she began Best Way to Divorce. Suzy, welcome so much. I so appreciate you choosing to join me today and to share with our audience what got you started. But first things first, please share who you are.
I'm Suzy Miller. I'm based in the UK, but I also work with people in English-speaking countries beyond the UK because when it comes to divorce and family separation, it's pretty much the same issues that come up. And I'm not a regular divorce coach. I'm more of a divorce strategist. And with the Best Way to Divorce resource hub that I've created, it's very much about educating, boot camping people for dispute resolution. So my focus is on peaceful ways to go through this. Is where mindset is incredibly important, and peace isn't fluffy, and so and a lot of people don't even have the basic information about their more peaceful options. They don't know what mediation really is. They don't understand the different types. They've never heard of collaborative law. So part of my role is to get that key information out as early as possible so people can make more informed decisions, because they're not getting told this clearly by the lawyers they go and see at an early stage.
Suzy, this is fascinating because especially after what happened in 2020, I know just in the circle I'm dealing with, the clients I'm dealing with, many people came to see their differences without understanding their sameness. You mentioned that the law is not always clear to people, and because lawyers work with it all the time, they're not always understanding of how to make it clear to people. No offense to lawyers at any all. I've got some wonderful lawyer friends that I think are awesome. What is the biggest challenge you see when people come to you?
That they haven't come soon enough. And they constantly say, "I wish I met you 2 years ago," which is why I've now created an employee resource, because I'm fed up with hearing that, and it's my moral duty in ways to get that information out earlier. But it's interesting what you mentioned. Lawyers, again, I've know some fantastic lawyers, lawyers also who are trained in dispute resolution. But a vast majority of what you deal with in divorce and family separation is nothing to do with the law. So
Mm-hmm.
the lawyers are the gatekeepers, but they're not the right gatekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively, I'm setting up, dispute resolution should be the gatekeeper. And then I learned I did divorce fairs. That's how I started. I put on the UK's first ever divorce fairs. And I began to realise that actually people can't manage to use dispute resolution unless they are boot camp prepared for it. There's homework they need to do. There's mindset changes to really get these amazing tools in the peace toolbox to actually really work for their families and for them. So what I found often say to people, I've got nothing against the lawyers, but they're part of your toolkit, and in many cases you will hardly need to use them at all. And I'm tired of so many people. I say, "How much have you spent on lawyers so far?" And they'll say anything from £2,000 to £40,000. And I go, "Well, where are you? What have you got out of that?" And the reason they're talking to me is they're a long way from actually getting things sorted, either on a practical level or a legal level. So the legal side is actually very small. You're ending a contract, but you've also got to, in the UK, you have the financial is completely separate. You can get legally divorced and remarry and still be legally tied financially to your previous spouse. You have to get a financial order or consent order. It's like a separate railway track. So even basic things like that people are not aware of. And that's what gets messy and expensive. The admin legal side is really simple. And sometimes you do need to use the family courts to tell with a letter and a court order a difficult spouse to do things that they should do legally. And unfortunately, the system doesn't work very well, and it can be expensive and slow. But there's so much of that you can do yourself. So even if you've got a really difficult spouse and you're in an abusive situation, you should never kind of give up and throw yourself at a law firm, because actually the end result could be much quicker and cheaper if you found the confidence, got some support, coaching support. How do you work with communicate with someone who's very, very difficult, and use the law as a tool to get them to do what they need to do. But don't just expect the lawyers to make it all work, because they tend to work off the basis that you're dealing with someone reasonable. And when you're not dealing with someone reasonable, you need to be able to say to the lawyer, right, we sent one letter, they're not doing what they said, I'm not paying for another 3 letters. Let's go to court now and get the order and tell them they need to provide the financial information, because otherwise we'll be here in 6 months and nothing will have changed. And
except your bank balance.
Yes, absolutely. And your sense of, emotionally, psychologically, you start to be worn down, because what the other person in an abusive relation does, they use the family law system. And this is the same in the UK, the same in the US. I imagine it's the same in many countries. They use it as a weapon, as a way to continue the abuse. And unfortunately, these institutionalized systems are often very well set up to be a playground for narcissists.
That is so interesting. When you mention the word narcissist, I'm sure a lot of people go, okay. What fascinates me is the way you have phrased it. In the war of divorce, make peace your weapon of choice. How did that come about?
I wanted to express that people talk about the battle of family separation and the war of divorce, and peace is not fluffy. And one of the biggest branding issues that mediation has, and I've promoted mediation more than most mediators. I'm not a mediator. I don't have time to do that job as well, but I'm an associate of Family Mediators Association. But there is this concept that this is this sort of fluffy thing. And unfortunately, this has been perpetrated by many mediators. Will screen out anybody tricky, and they go, oh no, if you're dealing with something very difficult, even if they're up for using mediation, they may go, I don't think that's going to work. And that's fine, because they don't necessarily, that's not their bag in how they to manage that. But I've managed to find mediators and collaborative lawyers and professionals who have got that skill set, shall we say, to deal with these difficult people. And technology's been fantastic. With Zoom, you can have a mediation where you don't even see the other person because you're in a breakout room. So if they're not going to be polite to you, boom. And the mediator's there is to keep things peaceful and hold that space. So being mediation, peace is about boundaries. It's about building your confidence so you can communicate clearly in a sensible way. And so that I wanted to have a phrase, make peace your weapon of choice, that was stronger. And it did upset a few people when I first came up with it. It kind of offended their sensibilities, because peace is supposed to be this fluffy thing you stick in the corner. And I'm like, no. Go and listen to Marianne Williamson. She's not fluffy. So peace is about courage, and this is something that became the core of my TEDx in 2019, which is really what it's about. Is what do we don't even, if we don't even understand what peace really means, how can we spread it? And I think I just disagree with most people's concept of it, and which is what I talked about in the TEDx.
Have you ever heard of the word shalom? It's a Jewish word.
Yes, I'm familiar with it, but not its.
Okay. The way the actual word is structured in Hebrew, I'm not going to go into it now, but it actually means calm in the midst of chaos, and that is what peace is: having that inner calm while the world is going wild around you. And I definitely feel that what you're offering allows a man or a woman or a couple to have that space of calmness in between the chaos that's going on. So for me, that is just that's why I noticed it. It's just such a beautifully descriptive phrase for what's happening in divorce.
And it's interesting you say that. I was interviewing a lovely chap who's been a member of my secret divorce group, which is a online support group. I have a live chat, so people got questions, so they can save themselves thousands of pounds because they don't need to. Most of what they need to know, they don't need a lawyer for. And if I don't know that information, I'll find it out for them. And also, I do a monthly Zoom where they can come on and talk to me without having to pay for a one-to-one session. And quite often there might only be one person there, so it's quite a good way for them to get a lot of extra support for a very small amount of money per month. But he was so happy with his experiences on the group for about 2 years, and he said, "Oh, I'd love to do a video and talk about it." So I interviewed him this morning, and one of the things he went into the workplace in this chaos, this horrendous. He was so affected by the, which is often the case, by what's happening and the way his wife was reacting, and how nasty it was getting with the lawyers and how expensive, and how it impacted all his work colleagues and his ability to work. Luckily, he had a very kind employer who really took time and trouble to help support him. But he said he found the support group was that place of calm where he could adapt his thinking and really see there were other possibilities and have the hope to, because rather than get stuck into the legal expensive way, he was able to understand these other options. And then luckily, and I encouraged him, I said, look, your wife might be angry and confused at the moment, but she's not stupid. If you express to her what her lawyer's probably not giving her these options as clearly, you may find she goes, great, she wants it over and done with too. She wants to not spend thousands more. And sure enough, it worked. So it's about creating that space online, and also through, hopefully again, live events in the future, because that's where it came from, of where people can do exactly that. They're going to be in a chaotic space. They may be in an abusive relationships. It's tricky stuff, but where they can get grounded, understand who's going to help them, whether it's coaching, which it usually is, whether it's financial expertise, which is definitely usually very important. And so I help them understand who are the best people to help them, and then introduce them to those people so that they kind of have a virtual team around them, and that they can move forwards and deal with pretty much anything, because it is one of the most traumatic things that can happen to someone, especially when you've got children involved as well.
Yeah, I so many times see the children being used as bartering chips, and it's very distressing. You mentioned about the workplace. Now, I know when my husband had his practice and somebody was getting divorced, it would really cause a little bit of chaos at work, from a concentration, a showing up, court dates, that sort of thing. What work do you do? I know you do work. Please share with our audience the work you do with companies, helping companies to cope with couples getting divorced.
I read a couple of years ago a blog about, and it's something I'd been interested in for a while, and someone mentioned something like a separating families policy, and I thought, oh, that's something I'm thinking people should have, but I couldn't find one, so I created one with an HR professional, and I made it clear, and looked at all the different other policies that it would interlink with, and just made a very simple template that they can very easily, they're such busy people, to easily adapt. And so that, and this is a typical example of it, someone will go to work, and I've got a couple of people just fairly recently where they were confirming this has happened to them. They go to work and they go, last night I was told the marriage is over, we've got small children, and they're absolutely devastated. And it's like, oh dear, get back to work. If they said my spouse died, immediately there will be in the policy, the bereavement policy, that they can get a couple of days off to kind of get their act together. And why isn't that there for divorce? Because it's almost you've got the bereavement physiological process of bereavement, and then they're bloody still alive. It's really stressful. So I make light of it, but it's such a massive thing. So that the HR departments should have things in place. So I've made it really, really easy for them, and they can use this policy. But more importantly, is also they can share a link to the Best Way to Divorce separating families and co-parenting resource hub, which is basically go online and there's loads of free stuff and information and inspiration, everything from a co-parenting online diary, and here's a code for a free subscription for both of you. So there's no excuse not to use these tools because they're so powerful at reducing conflict. This is all about dispute resolution. This is the stuff the lawyers won't tell you at the front. You find out about it far too late often in the process, when a lot of bridges are burned. So find out about it now. So lots of information, and this is all free. And then there's other things which are incredibly low cost, because I'm a big one. Everyone should be able to afford something. So there's workshops, and there's online courses and video courses. So there's everything I've put together over the last 10 years is in there in different forms to allow people to get what they need depending on where they are, even if it's just simply to watch some videos and get some links so they can petition for divorce, and you don't need a lawyer for that. Especially in the UK now, it's so simple to do. You can just do it yourself. So they've got those options, so they don't get led astray and pay more than they need to. But if they come as employees, they will be able to access that through a special company page. So any company that signs up for it, it's free to charities and not-for-profits, as long as they make contact with me and say, yes, I'm interested, by the end of September. Mm-hmm. And for smaller businesses, and I think it's under 100 employees, it's £44 a month plus VAT total. That's like not per employee, because the whole key thing is you don't know those employees. They shouldn't have to come to HR. You want to get them that information way, way, way before it gets to that stage, before they're taking, leave for stress and that kind of thing. And then if it's above 100 employees plus, it's £60 plus VAT total. So it's a no-brainer amount, because my ambition is that every employee in the country should have access to this resource. And they click on a link, they go in, the system recognises where they've come from, and they get extra stuff for free. If somebody just goes in direct, they'll get lots of great stuff, but if you come in via your employee link, you will get more things that otherwise you'd have to pay for. So they get additional benefits there.
Wow, that is extremely powerful. Now, I know each country has its different laws, and you still support people from other countries, because the legalities are one thing, the support and the mediation is another. What made you decide to open it internationally?
I'm trying to think, but I'll tell you why. Because I was obviously started with the UK, but then I went to my brother's American citizen. He lives in LA. And I went because when I go on holiday, I don't have a proper holiday. I decided to create a whole California online resource while I was there, and I have a lot of US contacts. And I ran earlier in the year, I ran a divorcing a difficult spouse workshop for California. It was terrible for us in the UK, because it was like 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning or something, but we had to be on California time. So I've got a lot of professionals that I can refer to there, and mediators. And what's interesting with California is if you divorce there, if you work with a mediator, when it comes to do the final, turn that agreement into a legal document, they can do that for you. In the UK, you still have to jump through another hoop, though I have got a much cheaper way to do it for you, by the way, if you than just paying a normal lawyer. So if it's not too complicated. So the differences, there are differences, but they're fundamentally almost the psychology of how do I approach this? How do I make the dispute resolution process work? How do I save thousands and thousands? It's the same. How do I, what tools can I use for co-parenting? So in fact, I'm about to be, I'm working with a Georgia-based, but they're now gone throughout the US, the Amicable Divorce Network, and they have come up with a great concept, because collaborative divorce, which a lot of people have never even heard of, is a wonderful thing, but in some areas it wasn't working so well. It was too restrictive. So they've come up with a way where you do work with lawyers, but they're lawyers who are absolutely focused trying to keep you out of court. They use mediation, and they kind of package it around the needs of the couple. And then we're going to create a UK version of that. So I'm very excited about that. So it's taken a long time and what's interesting is they're in the US and we're going to introduce that here. And I've invited a lot of UK lawyers, collaborative lawyers and mediators to come along and have a look at this. But it's coming from the US who started it off, not here. We're quite rigid here in the way we do things. And so I guess I am a disruptor. And by having that international approach, I can get the best from all of those. And ultimately, I'll work with anyone who's predominantly just wants these things to be done more peacefully, as in less stressfully, less expensively. Because that's what peace really means, is that you're not being driven by your anger and your rage. You're being driven by, what do we want to get out of this? How do we want this? Where do we really want to be? And can we just let go of this and not necessarily be right? I always say to people, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Love it. Do you wish to be right or happy? I feel you're more of a facilitator than a disruptor. You might be disrupting old paradigms, and you definitely feel as facilitating what is required. That is so powerful. If you had this is me being nosy, through the process you offer, have you ever had couples decide to not divorce?
Interestingly, that happened very early on when I did the first UK divorce fairs. They were called Starting Over shows. And I had a lady turn up and she said, we were in Guildford, and she said, I came to your last event. I said, oh, great. And I said, what happened? She said, well, I found out about dispute resolution. I found out about, talked to life coaches. And it was a real experience for her. And then she said, I visited the... we had a wonderful lady called Jane Orr who had and she read the cards, and she had cues because she's all about hope. And she said, I saw her, and she said to me, you don't really want to get divorced, do you? And she said, no. She realised her problem wasn't the relationship, it was her, and that she was stuck and didn't know where to go and what to do. And I said, oh, that's fun. I said, how's things? She said, no, we're great, it's fine, we're not. And I said, well, why have you come back to this show? And she said, oh, because I want to visit these startup business opportunities. And because I've always created very holistic. Even the first events I did in London and Brighton, they had we have everything from lawyers to yoga to business startup opportunities, because you need flexibility. And if you can have if you could start a side business that's going to give you an income plus more people to talk to, and maybe you're working flexibly around the children, it's going to put you in a better psychological state to then think about how to do the finances and how to agree on that. Because if you're coming from a place of fear, you're not going to make the best decisions, and you're going to be very difficult to work with. So if you can get excited about your new life, even if you're traumatized by it happening in the first place, because it may not have been your choice, and I certainly have been there, so I know what that feels like, you are going to make better decisions. But you've got to look forward at the bigger picture and then go, right, okay, how do I do this? So that whether you're not going to fight over the house in the same way, if you're thinking, if you've got a sense of what your longer term picture is of your life. And that's not just from working with a coach, but it's working with a financial planner who does long-term cash flow forecasting. It's a very practical approach. There's nothing fluffy about it at all, but it's very liberating and it's very exciting. And so yeah, I would have people who would and also I'd had people sometimes who'd be referred by a GP. And because often that's the first person they tell, because it is the psychological side of it is huge. And I had one lady I spoke to in a cafe, and really she didn't need to get divorced. I said, well, never mind the D word, just put it aside. Do you want to be financially independent? Because she was worried about the money, that he was going to blow it all. You've got a lot of people in relationships where there's addiction or just mismanagement of money, and she was getting older, and so it's a logical thing to be afraid of. And she said, yeah, I want that. So I said, well, all the things that I'm going to suggest you do are exactly the same as if you were going to get divorced, but actually you don't need to then get the divorce. You can have you can turn it into a post-nup. But feel more secure between you. But the conversations you have, the way you do it, maybe working with a mediator if it's difficult with him, you can actually end up in a place where you can actually continue your marriage. But you must address these things, because if she didn't do that, then divorce would be her that would be kind of an inevitable outcome.
Yeah.
So that can happen. So I always say to people, there's no such thing as a broken family. There's an extended family. So some people will choose to stay married, but they're living in separate homes. And as long as things are peaceful and respectful between them, that's all the kids really want. I have to say, though, that in most cases, when I'm talking to someone, it's an agonizing thing to decide to get a divorce. It really is. And I don't take that lightly. So I don't go, oh, have you been to counselling? Because I just think that's the most, excuse my French, shit thing you can do to someone. They've been through hell to even get to this state. It is not easy to decide to end a relationship of any type. And I think the media give a really distorted opinion about it, especially when you've got children. So it's a very difficult thing. So I always respect that decision. But my focus is that whether mummy and daddy stay in the same house or live in separate houses, you still have a family. So you need to find a way to work with each other that's going to work for you and your family and your children. And that's the focus. And quite often that actually means they do get a divorce, because that's the best mechanism to allow them to have that financial security and independence. Because if you're not getting on, you don't want to have all your finances in with someone who you don't trust anymore, for example, or was having an affair with someone. I mean, that's not great. So usually divorce is the outcome, but the way it's done is key and life transforming as well.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. You've given a lot of food for thought there. And to me, it really resonates because of my personal leadership coaching program, that we get to lead ourselves, not just the other person. So what you're offering is a tool of personal leadership, leading ourselves towards a better future. If you had to give one takeaway to our audience, what would that be?
The one that springs to mind is that when you're going through family separation, it's very easy to get angry, take everything personally, and to make assumptions about the other person. So quite often people will be spilling their venom about the other person, which I listen to without judgment. But then I'll say, do you think they're scared? And so far, every time they've gone really quiet and gone, oh yeah, I think they are. And then we've had a discussion about people are not at their best when they're scared. So I encourage people to kind of empathize, have a bit of compassion, but also combined with boundaries, but to think about how can we make it, even if you've got a really difficult narcissistic person that you're dealing with, how can you make them feel more secure and build trust? Which they'll, at that point, I say, you don't believe right now that's possible, but it is. That you and so the focus becomes on how do they become the ones who are understand what's happening in the process. They're making always sensible suggestions. And it's really interesting how that this difficult, angry ex can start to trust them more than their lawyers, and realize actually that they're just trying to end this in the best possible way. And I love that process. I love watching that. But everyone has to, who works with me or uses the resources, it's beneficial for them to allow that to be the process. You need to take that anger and resentment and just put it in a corner for a bit, because it is not serving you. And then it's like miracles can happen.
Oh, I love that. Miracles can happen. Tell us the phrase again. Do you think?
What's that? Sorry?
Please share that phrase again so that our audience really gets it. Do you think?
Do I think? I have no idea what you're asking me to say. Sorry.
Do you think the person is hurting?
Oh, yes, sorry. So when someone is having a rant, do you think they're afraid?
Do you think
they're scared? It really stops people in their tracks. And what is lovely about it is that someone can be so angry and so hurt, and yet immediately they're like, oh yes, they might be. Their ability to have compassion is straight away there, and that's a lovely, beautiful thing. And it is this balance between encouraging people, which where coaching is and working with people like yourself is so valuable, helps them to build their confidence, to have their boundaries. But actually that means through strength, that's where you can find that compassion. And the way when you work through that, it is incredible how even the most difficult people can start to play ball, because to be honest, it's in their advantage. Everything I do when I work with someone, I'm saying this is to the advantage of this person you're currently at war with. They'll never say thank you, but actually we're helping them as well, because we're coming up with something that is the best way to split this, and that's going to be good for the whole family. Because there's no point just giving up at the front, giving them everything, because then you're going to be bitter and angry, and feel that you know they've ruined your life, but actually you're the one who said, okay, I just want to just have this all over and done with, and you've accepted some terrible offer. So it's not about, like I say, it's about being quite strong. Sometimes I'll say to people, I want you to have a peaceful process here, but what you're agreeing to, how are you going to live? You've got children to bring up this, and he's in that living in the family home, and he's got a good job, and you haven't got any. And I think we need to talk about this. So it's not a soft approach, but it's about fairness. But at the same time, it's also about not fighting over things that are just going to cost you more time and money than ultimately aren't going to get you where you want to be, which is capable, competent co-parenting, even if you have to structure it in a way that you don't actually physically talk to them at all.
I love that. Oh, Suzy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us and our audience. I feel you have offered so much of value to do with make peace your weapon of choice in the war of divorce, especially just the thought that companies can help people through this, that there is help out there, and it comes down to who's the most scared in this situation. Suzy, where can people find you if they wish to know more?
Oh, it's great. It's bestwaytodivorce.com. That will take them to the main website. Bestwaytodivorce.com. It's that simple. And from there, there's information for employers. There's information for employees who want to tell their employers, I want you to have this, give us access to this resource, because you'll get extra stuff for free that way, and help all your other employees and colleagues in the process. And it's got resources for just an individual as well, who just goes, I want to find out what's going on here. So the earlier people use it, the better. But even if you're in the middle of nasty court battles, again, people come at all stages to make a big shift and to get the job done in a way that's going to give them the healthier outcomes in a healthier way.
Oh, thank you so much, Suzy. I so appreciate you. People, get hold of Suzy through bestwaytodivorce.com. And if you have friends who can make use of this, please let them know as well. Suzy, bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.